Good evening. 1 week away. NASA gearing up to launch Artemis 2 astronauts around the moon on April 1st. What if I told you that this upcoming NASA mission isn't just about the moon? What if the timing, April 1st, 2026, just 1 week away, is not coincidence, but calculation? What if what looks like a scientific milestone is actually a carefully timed signal in a much larger geopolitical game? Because when you step back and really analyze the pattern, when you align rising global tensions, economic pressure points, and the accelerating space race, it begins to feel less like coincidence and more like strategy. Let me walk you through this, slowly, step by step, because once you see it clearly, it becomes very difficult to make it. We are exactly 1 week away from Artemis, a mission NASA is presenting as a historic return of humans to deep space. Scheduled around April 1st, 2026, this mission will send 4 astronauts around the moon, marking the first human lunar mission since Apollo 17 in December 1972. That's over half a century. Think about that carefully. For more than 50 years, humanity did not send astronauts beyond low Earth orbit. Technology improved, economies grew, global systems evolved, but humans never went back. And now suddenly, after decades of silence, the United States is not only returning, but doing so with urgency, with scale, and with long-term intent that goes far beyond a single mission. Here's where it starts getting interesting. The Artemis program has been quietly building for years. Artemis 1 launched in November 2022 as an AD-BAY, successfully traveling around the moon and returning safely. That mission proved capability. Then came delays, budget debates, engineering challenges throughout 2023 and 2024. By mid-2025, NASA locked in Artemis 2 for a 2026 window. Now pause for a moment and ask yourself, why this timing? Why not earlier? Why not later? Because timing in global strategy is rarely accidental. Early 2026 is not just another moment in time, it is a convergence point. The United States is dealing with layered geopolitical pressure, tensions in the Middle East, ongoing uncertainty in Eastern Europe, and shifting alliances across Asia. Oil markets have been unstable, fluctuating between roughly $85 and $110 per barrel, reacting to conflict risk and supply disruptions. Global defense spending has crossed $2.4 trillion, with the U.S. alone nearing $900 billion annually. These are not normal numbers. These are signals of a world under pressure. And in the middle of that pressure, the U.S. chooses to launch one of the most visible, high-stakes missions in decades. That is not random. That is messaging. Because space is no longer just exploration. Space is power. Satellites already control communication, navigation, financial systems, and military coordination. Every GPS signal, every international transaction, every surveillance system. Space is already deeply embedded in how the world functions. Extending that dominance toward the moon is not symbolic. It is strategic expansion. By executing Artemis right now, the United States is sending a clear signal to China, to Russia, and to every emerging power watching closely. The signal is simple but powerful. We are not stepping back. We are moving forward. And we are claiming the next frontier. But let's go deeper, because the real story is not just political, it is economic. The Artemis program has already crossed $90 billion in projected cost by the mid-2020s, and that number will continue rising into the 2030s. That level of investment creates entire ecosystems. Major defense and aerospace companies like Boeing, Lockheed Martin, Northrop Grumman, and SpaceX are directly tied into this program. Contracts, supply chains, research labs, manufacturing lines, thousands of jobs and billions of dollars are moving through this system. And markets are watching very closely. Historically, major technological milestones tend to shift investor sentiment. Aerospace and defense sectors often see increased activity around major launches. Analysts are already projecting that the global space economy could exceed $1 trillion by 2040. Let that sink in for a moment. $1 trillion. That is not just exploration money. That is infrastructure, logistics, energy, communication, and long-term economic control. Now connect the dots carefully. Government funding drives innovation. Private companies execute the vision. Investors fuel those companies, and global competitors respond with their own strategies. This creates a cycle where space progress becomes economic leverage, and once that cycle begins, it accelerates. But here's where things become even more strategic. The moon itself is not just a destination, it is a resource hub. Scientific data has already confirmed the presence of water ice in permanently shadowed craters near the lunar South Pole. That water can be split into hydrogen and oxygen, which can then be used as rocket fuel. Now think about the implications of that. If fuel can be produced on the moon, then spacecraft no longer need to carry all their fuel from Earth. That reduces launch weight, reduces cost, and increases mission range. It also means that whoever establishes control over those regions gains a massive logistical advantage. Imagine a future where spacecraft refuel in lunar orbit before heading deeper into space. Imagine satellites being serviced or even constructed beyond Earth's gravity well. Imagine Mars missions becoming more efficient because the supply chain extends to the moon. That future is not decades away. That future is being built right now. And this is exactly why timing matters so much. China is not standing still. The China National Space Administration has already outlined plans for a crewed moon landing before 2030 and a joint lunar research station with Russia in the early 2030s. These are not theoretical proposals. These are active programs backed by state funding and long-term planning. If the United States delays, it risks losing first-mover advantage. Artemis 2 is not the destination. It is the signal that Artemis 3 is coming next, likely within the next 2 to 3 years, aiming to land astronauts on the lunar surface once again. So April 1st, 2026 is not the end of a journey. It is the beginning of a new phase. Now, let's shift to political strategy, because this is where the layers start overlapping. Space achievements have always carried symbolic power in the United States. During the Cold War, the Apollo missions were not just scientific, they were demonstrations of technological superiority. Today, Artemis serves a similar function. It reinforces the perception that the United States still leads in innovation, still leads in exploration, and still leads in shaping the future. And perception, in global politics, is power. Because when nations decide who to align with, who to trade with, and who to trust in long-term agreements, they look at leadership in critical technologies. Space is one of those technologies. Artemis becomes part of that decision-making process. Now, here's where it gets even more complex. There is an upcoming window between late 2026 and early 2027 where international discussions around space governance, resource utilization, and orbital regulation are expected to intensify. The Artemis Accords, supported by more than 30 countries, aim to define how space resources are used and how cooperation should work. But not everyone agrees. China and Russia have openly criticized these agreements, arguing that they are structured to favor U.S. interests. So when Artemis 2 launches just ahead of these discussions, it shifts the balance. It strengthens the U.S. position before negotiations even begin. It shows capability, commitment, and presence. Think about that carefully. In global negotiations, the side that demonstrates real-world capability often writes the rules. And this is where the mission transforms from exploration into leverage. Now let's zoom out even further, because the implications extend beyond politics and economics into systems-level control. Global supply chains are already fragile. Semiconductor shortages, shipping delays, and energy disruptions have exposed vulnerabilities. Space infrastructure offers a parallel system, one that operates above traditional constraints. Satellite networks already influence communication, logistics, weather forecasting, and defense operations. Expanding that network into lunar space creates a multi-layered system of control. Whoever leads that system gains influence not just in space, but on Earth as well. And the United States understands this very clearly. That is why Artemis is not an isolated mission. It is part of a larger architecture that includes the Lunar Gateway, future surface habitats, and long-term exploration strategies. Each component builds on the last, creating a network rather than a single achievement. Now compare that to China's model. Centralized planning, state-driven execution, and integration with broader economic initiatives like the Belt and Road. Two different systems, but one shared objective: control of the next frontier. Now let's look ahead 3 to 6 months, because this is where things start to accelerate. If Artemis succeeds, expect increased funding approvals for follow-up missions. Expect stronger international partnerships, especially with Europe, Japan, and allied nations. Expect market movement in aerospace and defense sectors. And expect China to respond by accelerating its own timeline. But if something goes wrong, even slightly, the impact could ripple across multiple domains. Public confidence could drop. Political pressure could increase. Markets could react negatively. In high-stakes environments, perception often moves faster than reality, and that is the risk of operating at this level. Now let's raise the biggest question of all. Is humanity returning to the moon for exploration or for control? Because once infrastructure is established, once resources are utilized, and once economic systems are built around those resources, the nature of the mission changes. It becomes less about discovery and more about influence, power, and long-term positioning. History has shown this pattern again and again. New frontiers begin with exploration, but they quickly evolve into competition. Oceans, airspace, cyberspace, and now space itself. And April 1st, 2026 may be remembered as the moment that shift became visible. So, as the countdown continues, as engineers finalize systems and astronauts prepare for launch, understand what you are really watching. This is not just a mission. This is a signal. A calculated move in a global chess game that is only getting more intense. And if you want to stay ahead of that game, stay connected with ANC News, because these are the deeper layers most people never see. And as we move closer to launch, and as the world watches what happens next, remember this: the story does not end here. This is just the opening move. The geopolitical chess match is just getting started, and ANC News will continue tracking every development.